April 18, 1942. 8 a.m. The flight deck of the USS Hornet, North Pacific Ocean. The world is a monochromatic nightmare of gray steel and white foam. 40-foot waves are smashing against the bow of the aircraft carrier USS Hornet, sending sheets of freezing salt spray over the flight deck. The wind is howling at a gale force 30 knots, tearing at the parkas of the deck crews who are slipping and sliding on the wet steel. In the center of this storm sits a mechanical impossibility. 16B, 25 Mitchell bombers are lashed to the deck. These are land-based medium bombers. They are heavy, wide-winged beasts designed for mile-long concrete runways, not the heaving, pitching surface of a carrier. They look grotesque here, oversized and out of place, their wings extending over the ocean on both sides of the ship. Inside the cockpit of the lead plane, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle watches the deck officer. The noise is deafening. The twin Wright Cyclone engines are idling, vibrating the entire airframe, eager to chew through the dense, wet air. Doolittle knows the math, and the math says he is already dead. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal from the start. Sail within 400 miles of Japan, launch the bombers, hit Tokyo, and land in China. But plans rarely survive contact with the enemy. 30 minutes ago, the task force was spotted. A small Japanese picket boat, the Nidomaru, radioed a warning before the cruiser Nashville blew it out of the water. The element of surprise is gone. Admiral William Bull Halsey had to make a command decision that would haunt him: launch now. But now is 650 miles from Japan. That is 200 miles farther than the maximum calculated range of the bombers. Doolittle looks at his fuel gauges. He looks at the heavy overcast sky. He knows that even with the extra gas tanks installed in the bomb bay, even with the guns stripped out to save weight, they do not have enough fuel to reach the safety of the Chinese airfields. They are launching into a void. The deck officer waves a flag. The chocks are pulled. You can feel the tension radiating from the thousands of sailors watching from the island's superstructure. They know they are watching a sacrifice. Doolittle revs the engines to full power. The B-25 strains against the brakes, the fuselage shaking violently. The carrier plunges down into the trough of a massive wave, the bow pointing at the ocean floor. Then, as the ship begins to rise, riding the crest of the swell, the timing aligns. He releases the brakes. The bomber lumbers forward. It looks painfully slow. It is fighting gravity, drag, and the sheer weight of the explosives in its belly. To the men watching, it looks like a car driving off a cliff. The left wheel hangs precariously over the edge of the deck, but Doolittle is a master aviator. He times the lift of the ship perfectly. As the bow snaps upward, he pulls back on the yoke. The B-25 claws at the air. It drops frighteningly low, skimming just feet above the whitecaps, spray hitting the fuselage. The propellers churn the water. For a heartbeat, it looks like he's gone in. Then, slowly, agonizingly, the nose lifts. The bomber finds a lift it needs. It climbs into the gray sky, a dark silhouette against the storm. One by one, the other 15 bombers follow. It is a slow-motion parade of courage. Some dip so low their wheels touch the water. Others struggle to gain altitude, their engines screaming in protest. But they all make it. Behind them, the USS Hornet turns and runs for home, disappearing into the squall. Ahead of them lies 6 hours of empty ocean, a hostile continent, and the most heavily defended city on Earth. Doolittle levels out his plane at wave-top height to avoid radar. He checks his compass. He is leading 80 men toward the heart of an empire that believes it is untouchable. The Japanese people have been told for months that no enemy wind can breach the divine land. They believe the war is something that happens in distant jungles, not in their own sky. They are about to be proven wrong. The Americans are coming, and they are bringing a message written in high explosives that says the war has only just begun. April 18, 1942, 12 p.m., Tokyo, Japan. It is a beautiful Saturday afternoon in the capital of the empire. The cherry blossoms are beginning to fall, dusting the streets in pink. In the parks, families are eating lunch. Children are playing baseball. The air raid sirens had wailed earlier that morning, but it was just a drill, another routine exercise to reassure the populace that the Imperial Army is vigilant. The all clear has sounded. The city relaxes. On the ground, no one is looking up in fear. They have been told by Prime Minister Hideki Tojo that the American Navy lies at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. They have been told that the Pacific is a Japanese lake. The idea of an enemy plane over Tokyo is as ridiculous as an enemy battleship sailing up the Sumida River. Then, a low rumble vibrates through the wooden houses of the suburbs. It grows louder, a twin engine throbbing that echoes off the tiled roofs. People step out into the streets. They look up and see 13 large, olive-drab aircraft flying impossibly low, some at scarcely rooftop level. The pilots are so close that civilians on the ground can see their goggles. In a moment of supreme irony, many Japanese citizens wave. They assume these are new Imperial bombers conducting a low-level flyby. They cheer. But inside the cockpit of the lead B-25, Jimmy Doolittle isn't waving back. He is opening the bomb bay doors. He lines up his sights on a factory complex in the northern sector of the city. He pulls the release. For 500-pound incendiary clusters tumble out of the belly. Crump, crump, crump. The explosions are not the earth-shattering thunders of the later B-29 raids. They are sharp, precise cracks. But their impact is psychological nuclear warfare. Smoke begins to rise from the Shiba ward. Oil tanks ignite, sending thick columns of greasy black smoke into the pristine spring sky. A direct hit strikes the aircraft carrier Ryuho, which is in dry dock for conversion, ripping through her deck. Panic spreads like a shockwave. This isn't supposed to be happening. The police lines are jammed with confused reports. The air raid sirens start screaming again, but is too late. The raiders are already moving at 300 miles per hour, skipping over the city, dealing their cards, and moving on. In the Imperial Palace, the atmosphere shifts from serenity to terror. The Emperor is there. The living God is resident. Japanese doctrine states that the primary duty of the military is to shield the Emperor from harm. If a single bomb falls near the palace, it is a stain of dishonor that can only be washed away with suicide. Doolittle has given his men strict orders: do not bomb the palace. He knows that killing the Emperor would only unite the Japanese people in a fanatical rage. But the Japanese High Command doesn't know that. They watch the American bombers buzz the city, terrifyingly close to the sacred grounds, and they feel the cold grip of failure around their throats. General Sugiyama, the Chief of Army Staff, receives the call. He has promised the Emperor that the homeland is inviolable. Now he has to explain why American engines are roaring over the Ginza district. The anti-aircraft fire is sporadic and inaccurate. The Japanese gunners are stunned. They are tracking the planes, but they can't believe what they are seeing. They are looking for carrier planes, small, single-engine fighters. Instead, they are looking at medium bombers that have no business being here. Where did they come from? They don't have the range to fly from America. They are too big for a carrier. Is a technological ghost story. As Doolittle's plane clears the city and banks south toward the open sea, escaping the belated swarm of Zero fighters scrambling from local airfields, the physical damage he leaves behind is negligible. A few factories damaged. About 50 people killed. In the grand calculus of war, it is a pinprick. But the mental damage is catastrophic. The myth of the divine wind, the kamikaze protection that has kept Japan safe from invasion for centuries, has been broken. The shield is shattered. Admiral Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, receives the news aboard his flagship, the Yamato. He becomes physically ill. He retreats to his cabin, refusing to see his staff. He knows exactly what this means. He warned the High Command that they had awakened a sleeping giant. Now the giant has reached out across 4,000 miles of ocean and slapped them in the face. Yamamoto realizes that the American Navy is not dead, is aggressive, unpredictable, and willing to take insane risks. He knows that he can no longer sit back and consolidate his gains. He has to go out and destroy the American carriers before they do this again. This raid forces his hand. It pushes him toward a decision he has been debating for months, a plan to lure the American fleet into a final, decisive battle at a tiny, insignificant atoll called Midway. The Doolittle Raid didn't destroy Tokyo, but it destroyed the Japanese strategy. It forced them to switch from offense to defense, from confidence to paranoia. But for Doolittle and his 80 men, the mission isn't over. They have survived the target. Now, they have to survive the fuel gauge. They are flying west toward China, into a gathering storm. Night is falling. The needles on the gas gauges are bouncing on empty. And the tailwind they were counting on to push them to safety has died. They are 80 men in 16 metal coffins, suspended between a hostile sky and a dark ocean, waiting for the engines to cough and die. April 18, 1942. 9 p.m. somewhere over the East China Sea. The sun has set, and with it, the luck of the Doolittle Raiders. They are flying blind. A massive cold front has slammed into the Chinese coast, creating a wall of rain and turbulence that tosses the heavy bombers around like leaves. The windshields are opaque sheets of water. The altimeters are fluctuating wildly. And then the red lights flicker on, fuel pressure dropping. One by one, across 16 different cockpits, the pilots realize the math has finally caught up with them. They are still hundreds of miles from the designated landing fields. They are not going to make it. Doolittle orders his crew to bail out. Imagine that moment. You are in a warm, vibrating machine 8,000 feet above a country you have never seen, in a storm you cannot see through. You have to unplug your headset, stand up, and jump into a black void. Hit the silk. Doolittle is the last to leave his plane. He sets the autopilot, looks at the instruments one last time, and dives into the wet darkness. The shock of the parachute opening snaps his breath away. Then silence. The roar of the engines fades, replaced by the hiss of rain. He drifts down, his boots dangling over an abyss. He doesn't know if he will land in a rice paddy, a Japanese patrol camp, or the middle of the ocean. He hits the ground hard, tumbling into a pile of liquid manure in a rice paddy. He is alive, but not everyone is so lucky. 2 crews tragically crash land off the coast. 2 men drown. 3 others swim to shore, exhausted, only to be captured immediately by Japanese occupation troops. Their fate will be a grim footnote in history: execution and starvation in prison camps. Another plane, hopelessly lost and low on fuel, defies orders and turns north. It lands in Vladivostok, Russia. The crew survives, but they are interned by the Soviets for over a year, pawns in a diplomatic game between Stalin and Japan. But for Doolittle, the night ends in a moment of crushing despair. The next morning, he stands by the wreckage of his B-25. It is a crumpled pile of aluminum on a Chinese hillside. He sits on a wet stone, holding his head in his hands. His crew finds him there. They expect him to be relieved. Instead, he is weeping. "I've lost all my planes," Doolittle tells his sergeant Paul Leonard. "I've lost my men. I've accomplished nothing. I'll be court-martialed for this." Is a rare glimpse of vulnerability. Doolittle believes he has failed. He thinks the raid was a disaster, a waste of machines and lives for no tactical gain. He doesn't realize that while he is sitting in the mud, staring at the ruins of his career, the entire free world is celebrating his name. He doesn't realize that in Washington, President Roosevelt is gleefully telling reporters that the bombers came from Shangri-La. And he doesn't realize that his failure has just triggered a chain reaction in Tokyo that will lose Japan the war. May 1942, Imperial General Headquarters, Tokyo. While Jimmy Doolittle is trekking out of the Chinese mountains, believing his life is over, the leadership of Japan is in a state of collective psychosis. The physical damage to Tokyo has been cleaned up. The fires are out, but the psychological wound is festering. Admiral Yamamoto sits in his briefing room. He is looking at a map of the Pacific that suddenly looks very different. Before April 18th, the Japanese defensive perimeter was tight, consolidated, and secure. Now it looks like a sieve. The American carriers had slipped through a gap in the patrol line, launched bombers, and escaped unharmed. To a man steeped in the code of Bushido, this is unbearable. The Emperor was threatened. The Navy failed. The shame drives the strategy. Before the raid, the Naval General Staff was cautious. They wanted to secure their gains in Southeast Asia and dig in. They wanted to force the Americans to bleed themselves dry attacking fortified islands. But after the raid, caution is thrown out the window. Yamamoto argues that the only way to protect Tokyo is to push the defensive line east, all the way to a tiny speck of coral called Midway Island. He argues that they must draw the American carriers into a fight and sink them once and for all. Because of the Doolittle Raid, the Japanese High Command agrees. They commit the entire combined fleet for heavy aircraft carriers, hundreds of ships, thousands of men to the Midway operation. They are rushing. They are reacting to an emotional provocation rather than a strategic reality. They are sailing into a trap because they are angry. And just 6 weeks later, at the Battle of Midway, that anger will cost them the war. The 4 carriers that hunt Doolittle's ghosts, the Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, will all be lying at the bottom of the ocean, burning underwater. But there's a darker, bloodier cost to the raid that often gets left out of the history books. While the Navy sails for Midway, the Japanese army in China seeks revenge on the ground. They know the American airmen landed in the Zhejiang and Jiangxi provinces. They know the Chinese villagers hid them, fed them, and guided them to safety. The order goes out, punish them. The Japanese army launches the Zhejiang-Jiangxi campaign. It is not a military operation, it is a punitive expedition. They burn entire towns to the ground. They poison wells. They execute anyone suspected of having seen an American plane. Historians estimate that 250,000 Chinese civilians were slaughtered in the 3 months following the raid. 250,000 people died to pay for the safety of 80 Americans. It is a horrific reminder of the stakes. The Doolittle Raid wasn't a stunt. It was the match that set the world on fire. It fundamentally altered the behavior of the enemy, turning a disciplined conquest into a frantic, vengeful defense. Back in Washington, D.C., Doolittle is summoned to the White House. He walks into the Oval Office expecting a reprimand. He expects to lose his command. Instead, President Roosevelt looks up from his wheelchair and smiles. He pins the Medal of Honor around Doolittle's neck. He promotes him to Brigadier General. Doolittle is stunned. He tells the president he didn't accomplish the mission. He missed the targets. He lost the planes. Roosevelt shakes his head. He understands what Doolittle doesn't. You don't measure this victory in factories destroyed. You measure it in the spine of the American people. 4 or 5 months after Pearl Harbor, the news had been nothing but defeat. Wake Island fell. The Philippines fell. Bataan fell. The American public was beginning to wonder if they could ever win. Then came the headlines, Tokyo bombed. It was the shot of adrenaline the nation needed. It proved that the war wasn't over. It proved that the Japanese weren't invulnerable gods. They were just men, living on islands made of wood and paper, waiting to burn. 2013, Fort Walton Beach, Florida. In a quiet room, a group of very old men gathers for the last time. There are only 3 of them left. 3 out of the original 80. On a table in front of them sits a display case containing 80 silver goblets. Each goblet is engraved with the name of a Doolittle Raider. For decades, they have met every year. And every year, they perform a solemn ritual. They call out the names of the men who died since the last reunion. They take the goblet of the deceased, turn it upside down in the case, and toast him. Now, almost all the cups are upside down. They open a bottle of Hennessy Cognac, a bottle from 1896, the year Jimmy Doolittle was born. It was given to Doolittle by the Hennessy Company with instructions that it should only be opened when the last 2 survivors remain. They decided not to wait for 2. 3 was close enough. The men are frail. Their hands shake as they pour the cognac, but their eyes are clear. They raise the silver cups. They don't toast to victory. They don't toast to the destruction of Tokyo. They toast to the guys who didn't make it out of the rice paddies. They toast to the Chinese villagers who died protecting them. To those who have gone, they say. They drink. The Doolittle Raid was, by modern standards, a tactical failure. It inflicted minimal damage. It lost every single aircraft involved. But in the grand arc of history, it was the single most important air mission of World War II. It forced the Japanese into the mistake of Midway. It bought the U.S. Navy the time it needed to build the fleet that would eventually crush the empire. It taught the world a lesson that resonates to this day. The most dangerous weapon in war isn't a bomb, or a ship, or a plane. It is the audacity to do the one thing the enemy thinks is impossible.